as I say, figuratively and literally, he's put us all together. And he's given us unlimited knowledge and example and ways of life and prashadam and prayers, bhajans, and as you were saying before, what would Jesus do? I say, what would Prabhupada do? You know, if I have some query, and because I studied Prabhupada as part of my sadhana, a lot of times I saw him do things. And there were things sometimes that were not in the Shastras. So to me this was an interesting study because it's a practical manifestation of how a pure devotee lives the Shastras. And the litmus test of anybody is how they deal with pressure. And Prabhupada dealt with pressure. He had tremendous movement, and it wasn't always smooth. And down the road, there were all sorts of things happening. One time, this car sped, and we were worried, was Prabhupada going to feeling fearful, and he said, could you back up and do it again, please? And they say you don't know the mind of your spiritual master, but you really don't, because that's why it's such a great adventure, because you didn't know exactly what he would do or say. I told a famous story about It's a Small World, and Prabhupada said, yes, it's insignificant. He just had a different mentality, being a transcendental man. So, today somebody said, tell this story, and I was thinking, so basically I'm going to go on a magical mystery tour with Prabhupada, but if anybody has any suggestions of a category too, like an improvisational comic, you can say, well, tell that story. But I want to give you an idea with these stories of his open-mindedness, his flexibility, and his playfulness. I think I'll start with in San Francisco. Everybody had their roles. Malati was the one who could procure anything, and Jamuna did cooking and calligraphy, and I was the photographer and the set of radio shows. Well, there's a different Jivananda's wife, Harsharani. And so some devotees really like to latch on to the rules, you know, go by the book. So Harsharani was that person. For instance, I was in Golden Gate Park in this grove that I could become like the Yamamoto in the Amazon, invisible. And everybody was going around, and I was reading the Penguin Bhagavad Gita, and Jamuna knew this hidden spot, and she came in and she proposed marriage to me with the romantic words, Harsharani says if you live together, you got to get married. Oh, that's the most poetic thing I've ever heard. Thank you. But it was Harsharani's fault, you see. So now Harsharani's the rule maker. So they're making pakoras in the kitchen. And the pakoras were at the perfect temperature. They weren't too hot and not too cold, and you can smell the aroma. And Prabhupada comes into the kitchen, and he sees the pakora, and he pops it into his mouth. And he didn't ever touch his mouth. That was our game in the 60s. We tried to, like Prabhupada, not touching your mouth. I remember on the way to Montreal, we had a big jar of gulab jamuns for Prabhupada, but on the airplane, Mukunda Samashun and I said, let's play the game to see if we could eat like Prabhupada. without touching our mouth. Sometimes the gulab jamun would bounce off us. We finished half the jar of the gulab jamuns, and by the time we got to customs, we were intoxicated, and they were wondering, what is these people doing with this jar of what were they, magic mushrooms? And they were going, but we got it anyway. So Prabhupada pops the pakora into his mouth, and Harsharani says, you can eat while you're cooking for Krishna. And Prabhupada pops his chest out and puts 2 more pakoras in his mouth. And she said, we can't taste anything when we're cooking for Krishna. This is the Vedic way. And Prabhupada said, well, who told you these rules? And she said, you did. He said, then I can break the So he had his playful side. Well, I was also asked to tell another story. Now we're going down the road in East Bengal, and we're in the ambassador car. All the cars were pretty much the same in India at that time. And anybody who's been to India knows that the horn and the brakes are more important than the engine. The engine may just get you on, but they're always honking their horns. I was wondering, why are you honking your horns so much? But sometimes you have to, because of the traffic, and then the brakes. So the horn broke, but it's essential in India because not only does the horn warn you of traffic, but there's a lot, as you know, there's a lot of people in India. So on the side of the road, there's people living in huts, there's cows, there's rickshaws, there's people drying dal. Humanity's going on. And the people that are walking by the road, when you honk the horn, they just automatically go to the side. So the horn was gone. The car was going close to people. Prabhupada saw that, so he said, give me my thali. Thali is a middle dish. So we gave him thali. Then he took his cane and went bong, 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 bong. And all the cows and dogs and just automatically Krishna's in charge. He has to be, because there would have been much more accidents than there are if he wasn't somewhat involved, because there's a lot of stuff going on. So then Prabhupada laughed and said, they will think it's an American invention and try to imitate. So now I'm sitting in a temple in Visakhapatnam. It's a beautiful beach place, and we all went with Prabhupada from Madras in the train. It was like a yatra. And so I was sitting in the temple, and Prabhupada and a number of devotees walked by the temple and were going to the beach. So I went after him to walk with him, but there are a lot of sharp barnacles on the beach, and I had to walk very gingerly because I didn't have any shoes. So once I asked Prabhupada in Vrindavan, because in Vrindavan you don't wear shoes, it's like a temple, and I said, should I wear shoes? And he said, follow in the footsteps of your spiritual master, and he has shoes. And so he looked at me like, where are your shoes? And even though I was so much with Prabhupada, I kind of switched into a new devotee, artificial, saying something that sounded good. And I said, when I'm with you, Prabhupada, I don't feel any pain. And he looked at me like, and because I was familiar with him, he teased me. He said, then why don't you cut your throat? Now, some devotees would have gone and cut their throat. I knew he was, Prabhupada said. So he said, there's enough tapasya, enough austerities in the world that you don't have to put more on yourself unnecessarily. So this is a really important point, because we may be selfish, but we also have to take care of our health and have to take care of everybody, your basics, and also maintain your individuality, which has been a theme we've been talking about that. Because otherwise it's an artificial relationship with Krishna. So sometimes people like to self-flagellate themselves or feel sorry or unnecessarily heap stuff on themselves that they don't have to. And as you know, the tridents of Shiva, one of the tridents is to overcome miseries from your own self. So it was a really good lesson that Prabhupada said, just wear shoes, don't unnecessarily walk in barnhouse. I don't know if anybody saw the movie The Party with Peter Sellers, but there's a scene in it where he's the new devotee and a friend of ours, Lou Gottlieb, is the guru, and he's just smoothly walking on the beach. And Peter Sellers can't take it because of his feet. And I felt like Peter Sellers walking gingerly, and Prabhupada was like just walking divinely. So then, does everybody know Yadavara and Vishaka? Do you know of them?
Yadavara came here, or both of them actually came.
Oh, good. Well, they're great devotees. Yadavara was in New York, and he wanted to do an article about the temple. So I said to him, if you really want to do an article, move it, otherwise it's just licking the outside of a jar, you're not diving into the honey. So he did. He moved in and did an article. When I was there, and there were some devotees from Hawaii, and they're more or less hippies, and there was this guy Sai who was doing Kundalini yoga, but I met them in London, and they had devotional hearts. I wanted them to move in. They said, we have another guru. Eventually this Sai became Siddhaswarupananda Swami. He surrendered him and all the devotees to Prabhupada. But they were, I knew them, but some of the devotees considered them hippies. If Prabhupada made that distinction, I wouldn't be sitting here right now in front of you. So Prabhupada was very open-minded to all the characters and all the people who came in. And so they said to me, Gurudas, we want to buy some redundas and kartals, but no one will sell it to us, and books. So I just went to the temple president, Bhavananda, and said, give me the keys to the book room, please. He did, and I opened the book room and sold him $309 worth of books. Well, some bodies saw this and tattled on me. And I'm telling you, Prabhupada did not like pettiness, artificialness, snitches. He just didn't. So this guy tattles on me, and so I was taken to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, they said, he's selling books and redundas and kartals to those hippies. Prabhupada says, did you sell books and redundas and kartals to those people? Well, I kind of stretched the truth to Prabhupada once, and he totally busted me and read my mind. So as I was saying this morning, it was futile. Irregardless of the consequences, I didn't dare lie, because every time I tried to even spin the truth, he would know. So I said, yes, I sold books and redundant to those people. So, and Bhavananda was there seeing, he's in a good position. Prabhupada said, they're reading my books? They're chanting Hare Krishna? And he wanted to crawl under the rug. So the point is that Prabhupada didn't like tattletales. I saw it so many times. So Yadavar did the article, and now he's in India, and he's a very good photographer, and his wife was a good photographer, and they're really good devotees. However, they're somewhat stoic and Buddhist-like, and we used to have an in-house joke about them that Yadavar says, "Yes, Vishaka, that was the most ecstatic kirtan I ever experienced. Yes, Yadavar, I'm in bliss too." It's kind of like stoic. So that was is it true? Is it sort of, but that's maybe me, but it's a joke. Okay. So he gets an article in this really racy, like the Berkeley Bard. It's a magazine with all sorts of stuff in there, half-naked women, and but his article's in the middle of it, and so he had it open to the article. So, like I said, Prabhupada would bust you all the time. So he closes the door, the magazine, with his lotus fingers, and he did it just perfectly. And then he goes from page to page, and he didn't make any expression change with most of the articles. But when it came to the Krishna conscious one, his eyes went up a little, and then he went to the rest of it. And Yadavar by this time is like stammering, excusing, rationalizing, changing colors, trying to become invisible. And Prabhupada comforted him with the article again and said, "When you find gold in a filthy place, pick it out." So this applies to Krishna consciousness too. When you find an oasis in the material world like this, pick it out. Because, you know, it's such a nice gathering today, the birthday gathering, and it's deserved. And everybody just is exuding their appreciation, but they wouldn't do it if it wasn't true. And I go all over the world, and each temple is autonomous and has different ways of doing things. But I'm really impressed with this community, and I feel that this is a new family that I'm a part of just by getting to know each and every one of you. So this is gold in a filthy place. I was talking about doing things together. You know, when you're doing it together, everybody's successful, and when you do it yourself, you might be to blame. So Prabhupada always encouraged us to do things together. And that's also, when you do things together, it's easier to do your practice, and it's also harder to fall down. So there's all these reasons to do things together. It just makes it easier.
You reminded me of a story, Gurudas Prabhu, that, and I don't remember the details, but when they bought the Fisher Mansion, which was an amazing property that was owned by a body of Fisher, and it was there's so many stories within these pastimes, but I just brought to mind one that the devotees were going through on a tour, and they had beautiful like museum pieces, and just stunning. Prabhupada said each room was worth the price of the whole building that they got. So they went around, and there was a statue of was it a totally naked woman or just half? There's some kind of, statue there. And the sannyasis were like, oh man, they're looking down. They didn't know where to look, and they were so embarrassed, and Prabhupada was there. And then Prabhupada made a comment about how beautiful the statue was, that it was some kind of French artist, and he was appreciating.
And I was with Radhanath Swami in Regent Park, and there was one of those statues, and he was just looking at it. Another reason why I'm impressed with him is It's no big thing. So, at that time, there was a really nice devotee named Govardhan. And there was this other devotee that was envious and wanted to depose him as president and become president. And he said to Prabhupada, Govardhan's not chanting his rounds. Govardhan's not chanting his rounds, so I should be president. Prabhupada said, how do you know he's not chanting his rounds? He said, well, Govardhan told me. He said that he should be president because he's honest. Again, example how Prabhupada didn't like pettiness. He didn't like... The same guy was criticizing the women in Vrindavan, some women. And Prabhupada said, if you had 1/10 of their devotion, you'd be a great devotee. And these were Madhvi and Palika and Kasali and Janina, and did fantastic service. So, as I was saying this morning or sometime, that usually there's the thing, familiarity breeds contempt, but with Prabhupada, it wasn't like that. Because he was constantly feeding you what you needed. He really saw into the hearts of everybody and what they needed, he would inspire, and there was really a gamut of different types of personalities. And he, like Krishna, was all attractive. He attracted them all, and slowly we became from barbarians into Vedic Brahmin gentlemen and ladies, but Prabhupada had to be very open-minded. We know the story of how Jagannath came when Malati did the 5-finger discount and brought him to Prabhupada, and he bowed down and said, Samashunda, can you make more? Oh, he said to her, are there any more? And she said, yeah, I think there are 2 others. He said, go get them, and she did a 10-finger discount and got the others, and then he bowed down and he said to Samashunda, could you carve these? And Samashunda was a carpenter, and so Samashunda says to me, New York wants the Swami back, so let's just do it really slowly. So he was taking his time, and Prabhupada came near, and it was about 3/4 of a mile away from the temple where he's living. And he knocks on the door and says, Bhaktivedanta Swami here. And Samashunda opens the door, and there's a lit pell-mell at the base of Lord Jagannath burning, and Prabhupada takes his cane and goes whack, and this pell-mell goes flying across, and he says, you don't need this, and get in the way of your Krishna consciousness. So then finally Lord Jagannath was there, and he told us how to do the Jagannath car festival, but we didn't know anything. So one day, not me, somebody said, let's take Lord Jagannath for a walk in the park. Now in India, Lord Jagannath goes out of the temple one day a year only. Subhadra and Balaram, they don't go out. And actually, we're still trying to get admittance here, but that's another story. So somebody took Lord Jagannath for a walk in the park. Prabhupada heard about it. He ran. He didn't walk. He gets there and sees Lord Jagannath's in the park. So he said, Lord Jagannath doesn't come out of the temple. Except once a year at a car festival, and I'll tell you about the car festival. But he didn't yet. And he said, but as long as we're here, we might as well sit down and chant. And so you sat down and chanted the Lord Jagannath in the park, and then somebody brought a big speaker and then the microphones. So he, and then there's a picture of that in the book. He, like that Pope that I said that I liked, that half the people were working, he empowered women more. He empowered us to be Brahminical. He did a lot of things that were evolutionary, that they're not breaking the tradition, they're just evolving with the times. Because part of the philosophy is time, place, and circumstance. So things change, and Prabhupada accepted the dictaphone. He sometimes made fun of scientists because they're so pompous. But he wasn't against scientific inventions in youth for Krishna. There's a story. One scientist, there's 3 scientists. One scientist says, well look, that bird has flown on the tree and caused the fruit to drop. The other second scientist said, no, you didn't see it right. The bird flew and the fruit dropped of its own volition, voluntarily, and then caused the bird in the flight. And the first scientist said, no. The bird was the cause of the fruit to drop. And the second scientist said, no, the fruit was the cause of the bird to fly. And the third scientist went and ate the fruit. The other story about scientists, this is a famous one, they're in a boat. There's a boatman, and the scientists come and they get in the boat and they say to the boatman, do you know anything about the local flora of this? He said, what's flora? Okay. Do you know anything about the flowers? I just row the boat and chant Hare Krishna. Do you know anything about the fauna in the area? Well, I just chant and row the boat. Do you know anything about the cumulus clouds? Well, I just row in the boat and chanting Hare Krishna. The cumulus clouds come up and the storm comes and capsizes the boat. And the scientist, I forgot, the scientist says, well, the first thing, you've wasted a quarter of your life, and then the next thing, you wasted a half of your life. And then because you didn't know the next thing, you've wasted 3/4 of your life. And then the boat capsized, and the scientist said, I can't swim. And the boatman said, well, you've wasted all of your life. So, and the other one was sewing the limb. So he would make sometimes fun of scientists. Oh yeah, the good one was when you were in school, you'd see things in biology or something that this gas is odorless, tasteless, and there's a third one. Whatever it was, this gas is basically invisible and tasteless. And Prabhupada said, well, who did the testing? It's like, okay, it's odorless, as the guy's, going to. So he would have this humor about sometimes